Hello, welcome to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. I'm Natalie Roberts and I'm here with my co-host, Heather Parks. We've both been in our neurodiverse relationships and families for more than 25 years. We met 10 years ago when we were feeling really desperate and trying to solve a lot of issues in our relationship and our families. We've been journeying since then. We've found many more positive and hopeful ways to solve, resolve, repair, reconnect in those relationships and in our families, in our lives. And we now co-host also Loving Difference online, giving hope and a way forward for neurodiverse relationships. In this podcast, though, we're busting the myths about neurodiverse relationships, which we had when we started this journey, that we've realized aren't true, and that actually were preventing us from recovering and having the relationships with our partners and children that we wanted. So we want to dispel these myths and bring you hope that absolutely things can change. So whether you're out and about or comfy with a cuppa, let's dive into our next conversation. See you there.
Welcome back. In this conversation, Natalie and I are going to be talking about gaslighting. So just want to give you the heads up. Obviously, this is quite a difficult subject. And what we're really trying to get to the bottom of it in this conversation is this term the right one to be using in our neurodiverse relationship? We are in no way invalidating the impact that these feelings can have on both parties in the relationship. And we're in no way saying that we don't do anything about it. However, we are just really questioning whether gaslighting is the right term and whether it's helpful in our relationships. It's a funny topic, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very interesting one.
Yeah, I've been reading so much.
Yeah.
It comes up all the time now. It comes up particularly, I'm in a lot of groups where they are SEN advocates. Mm-hmm. They talk a lot about schools gaslighting parents. Yeah. And it's a reference that I've sort of fallen into using sometimes and then thinking, is that the right term? Actually, is it the right term? So do you want to kick us off? What's your definition of gaslighting then?
Oh, Christ. Well, yeah, it's definitely a term or a phrase or concept, let's say for now, that I think I have seen since I've sort of dropped into neurodiversity land 6 or 7 years ago. I've seen it sort of explode a bit in terms of the degree to which it's used, the amount of situations it's used for, the people that it's being applied to. And that's worried, that's actually, the more I guess wondered about that and reflected on that, it's actually worried me the extent to which that's happening. My definition, I came across this, I don't know, maybe a year or so into my journey with everything, and was in some groups, Facebook groups primarily, where they were starting to use or were using that language about and these would be groups where you only had the neurotypical or non-autistic partners, and they were referring to a lot of the behaviours of their autistic partners, or what they were seeing as gaslighting.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd never even heard of that phrase when I started seeing it. I was just like, literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Not watched the film?
No, I never heard of it. So I had to Google it, which is what I do with everything. Need to learn about it. So I read it and it really frightened me. I was really shocked that I might be in something that included this thing. So what I understand gaslighting to be, in the way that it was originally defined, was specifically out of a movie where there was a relationship between a man and a woman, and in this movie, the man in the relationship was controlling the lights in the house and turning them down ever so slightly every day. And the woman was sort of turning them back up, but then they would always get turned down. And she was saying, I'm sure it's like, this is just me paraphrasing, I've never seen the movie, but I'm sure it's getting darker it seems like the lights aren't working, it's getting darker in here. And he would say, no, it's not, it's always been like this. And then they'd get a bit darker and very, very, and he kept saying that. And so she started to not believe herself. Yeah. She started to think that she was going mad. Out of, and I do get quite goosebumpy when I describe even that, like my body is doing a really not nice thing, and I can remember
it's
my body
really horrible, isn't it?
when I read about it, and about it potentially being applied to my husband, which is basically what I was reading, and felt very unnerved about that. And so basically it's talking very much about intentional control of somebody.
Yeah, this is someone who was kind of pathologically wanting to do harm to his wife because he had an inheritance in mind, wasn't it? There was money, motivation, there was all kinds of things going on, and it was definitely intentional, planned. He knew what he was doing, he knew the impact it was having on her, he was totally aware of his actions.
So I started reading all of that, and I was also at the same time starting to learn more about autism and the autistic experience, and how Pete was perceiving the world, and realizing how radically different Pete perceives the world and situations and environments and sensory experiences different than I do. So I was learning both of these things at the same time, and I just remember thinking, I'm really sure Pete's a good man. He's a good person. He's got a good heart. I don't think that this is what that is. I just had a gut feel that this didn't feel right. But at the same time, I could also see myself in what they were describing as the impact of the person who is gaslighted. Yeah. That you don't believe yourself, that you start to not trust yourself, you start to think you're a bit mad, you feel controlled, you feel emotionally deprived, and your emotional well-being and various other aspects deteriorate. So I was recognizing the symptoms of the gaslighted person. I was like, well, that is me, but I don't think that is Pete. So things just didn't add up, and it's very easy to just use these words and labels because they're there, but I just was feeling very uncomfortable about it. So I kind of dug deeper, and just like you said, Heather, I definitely came to the conclusion that the difference is intent. That's the biggest difference. Is there an intent to invalidate somebody's experience or to harm somebody? Is that the intent that somebody has? And I was absolutely certain that was not the case for Pete. That was not the case of what had been going on in our relationship. Calling it abusive didn't feel like that was correct. Just didn't feel correct.
No. And I'm sure you remember, don't you, that I actually pulled over after going to a course for work. I was doing a safeguarding course which involved, it was all about domestic abuse. Yeah. And I got really upset at that course because like you said, I recognised some of those kind of things. I was like, tick, tick, tick. And I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, I had to really steady myself and just think, no, this is different. That's not what he's intending to do at all. And but I was really shocked and upset at the time when I had that kind of checklist going along and thinking, oh my goodness, yeah. So that was really shocking. Yeah. But I agree, I came to the same conclusion that it's completely different. There's no intent. No. And also then, not only was that then I too started reading more about the autistic experience, and then I began to realise that I was doing exactly the same, to him, because you'd kind of go, he'd be like going, what's that noise? And you're like going, there isn't a noise. That's just as gaslighty in that sense of unintentional invalidation of someone else's experience. Yeah. And really, it came from just experiencing the world very differently, not an intention to dismiss each other or to kind of harm or cause any angst.
We're
And it was just,
genuinely not having the same experience, and
yeah,
until that's brought into our awareness that would even be possible, because prior to that, I was convinced we're the same kind of human being. There is only this kind of human being, and we're all having the same experience, sensorily, emotionally. We're all doing the same thing. That was my awareness and my knowledge and understanding up until the age of 40, 41 or something, whatever it was,
whatever age we are now.
Suddenly, okay, now I have a bigger awareness that there's many multiple experiences of the world. And so some of these concepts, if we reduce them, it's sort of quite reductionist, I think, to start applying that phrase or concept to many more situations that actually I think are more complex than that. What I think is really important on top of that as well, though, is that I'm one for words, so I started to try and dig around to find a word that would describe what Pete was doing, or maybe even what I'd been doing, but that was healthier or just more helpful than that one. And the word that I came to, rather than abusive or gaslighting, was neglect. And again, there was no intent to neglect. But we were both unaware and actually quite incompetent to be able to provide the resources or support that somebody was needing for their experience. As much as Pete. I could say Pete.
That's a hard word too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard, but I
that
do there was that only because I didn't know.
Does a bit of that too.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, isn't it? So yeah, neglect. And it did feel like that. So I'm not saying that's not how I felt.
And I think maybe I'm a bit probably beyond that now, but that's kind of that felt more little bit better than, oh, you're in an abusive relationship, and I was thinking I've got kids in this, and this,
what am I modelling?
That I should be going immediately.
Yeah.
And then what I needed to do on top of that, though, was to validate that even though Pete's intent or my intent towards Pete, or there wasn't intent, something had been going on, the experience that both of us now, or the impact it had was to still validate that impact.
Yeah.
So even though I might be getting rid of the gaslighting thing, it didn't mean I would get rid of the impact it had on me to not know what had been going on. And I think Pete also, I would say he experienced the same, where he tried to be more like me and fitted in and sort of gave up his own experience of life, and I did the same in order to try to get on some kind of similar track, which wasn't good for either of us. But it was really important that I actually did validate the impact it had on me and therefore do something about that. But I didn't need to blame or make Pete into
a monster,
kind of monster person.
No, because the fact is that they've experienced that invalidation their entire life.
Yes.
We may have come into it as part of the relationship, but that's often been an autistic person's experience, from
the whole time.
What they say is from forever, right from childhood. So to then sort of blame, what's the point? There's no blame, is there really? Everyone's just had, it's all trauma, isn't it? Yeah, it's all trauma, and it all needs to be gently teased out, and a whole pile of sort of forgiveness and self-forgiveness as well. Because I actually felt really bad when I realised the part that I was doing it too, because that was quite a big thing as well. And often, I read I came across the term now, it's also being used, and I think, what's the point? Because it's like completely contradictory. It's unintentional gaslighting.
Oh, okay.
I was like, but gaslighting is intentional. You can't have unintentional gaslighting, because that surely is just like completely, I don't know.
Well, again, I think when you know where
right and right is left, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a very unhealthy blaming, labelling word to put on somebody. I just don't think it's helpful to try, particularly if you're wanting to create connection or repair or actually find a way through a situation, to label that on somebody or to accuse. It feels like more like accusation than it does to, again, we would always talk about curiosity or trying to sort of see it a different way or something, you know. I'm not trying to bypass what's situations where this absolutely is happening. This is not to dismiss that at all, but I think I think that's where it can get sticky if we're again trying to sort of manipulate almost the language. Words. And I just think there's some more helpful ways to talk about it, and all just see it more as some compassion and responsibility when you do know. I think that's all we need.
I love that, actually, that term, and compassion and responsibility, because it's recognizing what we didn't know then, and how, you know, that there wasn't any intention, and we have compassion to ourselves for the mistakes that we've made. We have compassion for others who've made the same mistakes, and actually now it's just about getting back into connection and repair, and what we can do to both be our genuine selves and then find some points of connection, isn't it? And I
can't see where there's any value in accusing or I can't quite think. It's almost convicting somebody of something like that, and them then having that as part of their story or identity. I just honestly don't think it's the truth for vast majority of people in these situations. It's very often just purely a not known and not realizing the experiences. I was thinking of a couple of examples that I can think about with Pete and I. And it's funny because just one of them is like, this week we changed our duvet over to the winter duvet, and
cozy.
It feels a very weird thing to maybe talk about, but for 15 years I said to Pete that I'm cold going to sleep. I'm free. I get really cold and I'm not warm enough, and Pete just said, that's ridiculous. I mean, how can you, there must be something wrong with you, or it's warm enough. And I went to sleep cold for many, many years, because I didn't have other way. I didn't have other. I realise now for myself that I lost my voice. I wasn't good at speaking up. I trusted other people more than I trusted myself. I didn't want Pete to be annoyed if I did something else, or it was like if I would have a thicker duvet, he would get too hot, and then that would cause a problem. And so I was a pleaser. So I just did a load of pleasing, and went to bed freezing. And there was a load of sensory stuff. Like I didn't like the smell of hot water bottles. I didn't like the feel of certain clothes, and it's just all really complicated. There's a lot of other things now that I can see why that was so difficult, and we do have very different experiences of temperature. Just that. So now I had to get, in the end, even with Pete's disagreement, that I would have an electric blanket on my side of the bed, and that was huge for me to make that happen. And it feels like it should just be really easy, but it wasn't, because I had to get over all of my stuff about believing myself, trusting myself, doing something for me, all that kind of thing. And then on the opposite side, where I was doing it to Pete, it would be something, I think, where I would find it really easy, like making a phone call, and Pete or answering the door, and Pete having a million reasons why he wouldn't do that. No, I'm not. I can't make that call. All sorts of reasons why that wouldn't happen, or it was difficult, or I don't know, things like that, or seemingly avoiding answering the door. Why I always had to get up and answer the front door. And I would just say, why can't you? That's ridiculous. Like, just go and do it. And now I know that is so much anxiety for him. That is why those things, he doesn't do those things. And answering the door, or even the possibility of the door being knocked on, means he doesn't relax at home. They're really small things that for me make no sense internally at all, because they are nowhere in my experience. And it's very easy for us to say, well, that's just ridiculous. Look, it's just a door. Like, it's just somebody's just going to knock. Just go and answer, or just pick up the phone and talk to the person.
We have so many
couple
similar
of examples for me where I feel we could easily use the same idea.
Yeah, I can relate to it's very similar stories on our side. We have things like, this endless check-in that there's no one outside before we leave the house, and they do seem silly. But then I also, for me, it seems really silly to get upset about, the fact that someone's left the cupboard open, because I don't see why it's not that big a deal just to push it shut. It's just there are so many things that are all so little, and they've come in over time, and it's just all happened gradually. And I think it has a lot to do with the personality that we are anyway, or we were even before the relationship, that's meant we accommodated, bended around, and suddenly kind of woke up and went, oh my God, I don't have a voice, I don't have any of these things. So it's almost like their anxiety, which created their need for control, combined with our lack of being able to speak up for ourselves, having the courage of our own convictions, that it, is like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like a perfect storm, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's kind of like, I think that's not going to have been everyone's experience. And I think, actually, if I look back, I managed those things a lot better, because it was over time that I began to lose my self-esteem and my belief in myself. Actually, earlier on, I'm not saying that I was right to doing this either, but I was much more outspoken, much more likely to argue, or and that didn't work either. I wasn't doing that the right way, but I was less likely to just yield and bend. But I think after a while, I was a mum, and I was tired, and I lost my confidence because I wasn't working, and all those things played into this kind of, he must know best.
Yes. Yeah.
And defaulting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's definitely that, for me, it was a recognition. The way I think I felt more empowered again was to recognise that I had been contributing to the possibility of neglect. I had been. Pete still says some things now where it's only because I do have a voice, and I have a different approach. It could easily still be invalidating, or I could hear it as criticism, or I could. That still isn't his intentions. But I had a chip that kind of heard that all very easily. Now I can hear things that could still, in a different relationship with different people, be still heard as, or received as, or interpreted as invalidation or criticism, or those kinds of things. And I think if we're able to recognize, is there anything in me or any part of me that is allowing that, or reacting to that in an unhealthy way, that's where I can find some agency to change the response and the outcome for myself.
Yeah, you can definitely, I think,
really, really with assurance that I do know, and I'm confident about my knowing, which is what I definitely was not from my childhood. I wasn't confident of my own knowing.
No, and I think that's come over a lot of time and a lot of work, hasn't it? But I think what it means is that A, we know ourselves, B, we know our triggers, and C, we're able to put up some kind of boundaries, emotional boundary. I always think of myself as, those orbs where you kind of, I always think of that. I'm in a zorb. Sometime.
Can we do some zorbing sometime?
Yeah, I'd like to do
metaphor for energy protection.
Yeah, but I do. I sort of imagine myself in one of those zorbs, and when
bounce off Bill every day.
Yeah, it sort of bounces off me. I'm like, I don't need to get reactive to that. And and to be honest, the other thing you realise is it's not just about neurodiversity, because any blooming person, anyone can activate those things, and they're usually because there's some truth in it somewhere. And that's the things that are the most annoying.
Yeah, I think there's definitely complexity for us around the degree of difference, and also that our perception of environments and sensory information and anxiety are also all layers inside of what we're often dealing with, and either one or both partners might have that. It's not all in one or other.
And I think actually both end up having that. Both end up having that normally, because once, I mean, I ended up like an anxious mess. There wasn't just one lot of anxiety. There was like 6 lots in this household.
Because the other day on Brené Brown's podcast the other day, she did say that anxiety is the most contagious emotion. And I loved it, because the next thing she said was that calm is the next most contagious emotion. So I was like, we all need to be calm, learn calm, do calm, and then we can contaminate people with calm rather than
I remember so clearly just thinking, oh my God, every single member of my family is falling apart. What are they all? And then I was thinking, I wonder if I'm the common factor here. And just thinking,
if I'm doing anything at all, anything.
Because of course I was thinking I'm only being like this because they're being like, and then actually realised the power of like being able to make those changes, and it is really empowering. And then all of a sudden you can stop all like undermining and just messing.
So you're right. We've been seeing gaslighting appearing in many more situations, and I'm in quite a lot of. I see it in Instagram accounts and in Facebook groups, which are often. I mean, in Loving Difference, we're very happy to have all neurotypes, which I think makes the culture and dynamic slightly different. But in places where you're primarily one or the other, it's either neurotypical or non-autistic or non-neurodivergent, and then in the autistic community or neurodiverse community, etc. There's very much they're gaslighting us, and it sort of just throws all the blame somewhere else. And like you were saying, even in schools now, it's the
I was going to say even in schools.
But
they're not intending to do it either, are they?
No, the problem is
they're
just
not
that people
getting
don't know
it
enough. People haven't recognised enough what they don't know, and we're just sitting very certainly and in our rightness of something, and not open enough to other truths.
And not even challenging the language, because it's just being bound around and actually not bringing it back down to its roots and those gaslights, which were, a very, very different situation. There was nothing about, he was.
And what it does to a person, just to sort of say, I can own the idea of what I was doing, but for somebody else to accuse me of gaslighting, that has a very different impact on me. That will take me into defense mode very quickly, and
that would be, but I only did it because you did, that's that territory, isn't it?
It's not gonna solve anything, is it?
Should we open up the floor?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to know how this is landing for you, because I know it's a really sort of controversial topic. So yeah, I'm really keen to hear what others' experiences have been, and how anything that we are saying or talking about, whether it, we're not here to change your mind or persuade you of anything at all. But it's, I guess it's just allowing in and having some different perspectives. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you think. Are you going to unmute everybody? And
I guess it's just, it's whether you recognise that you felt any of those symptoms. I guess that's interesting. Whether you can see that perhaps it was two-way.
Yeah, where have you come across it?
Where have you come across it? Yeah.
What have you? How has that felt for you? Where you've encountered it?
Hey Heather. So and hi everybody else. This is a little postscript to our conversation the other day around gaslighting, because as usual, both of us have had a few afterthoughts and reflected on our conversation, and wanted to just add on a few things that we thought about after we'd spoken that we felt were important. Do you want to pick up from what we were just saying, Heather? Can you remember where we were with our thread?
Yeah, so hello from me. I just welcome. I'm in my mobile office, as you can see, and just picking up where we left off, and we both had lots of thoughts around how complicated this subject was really, and how difficult it is to make sure that we've explained kind of where we were coming from in terms of you know, absolutely not thinking that people need to put up and shut up or just accept it or get used to it or anything like that. That our focus really, what the conversation was, is it gaslighting if it is unintentional?
Yeah,
That
that's
was
true.
really our kind of thread of that conversation. It was really questioning the terminology of gaslighting.
Yeah,
And
and how helpful that or not that can
yeah,
be. Yeah,
yeah, and how kind of pathologizing almost that term is when it isn't used with the right intention. So I think we just wanted to clarify some things, didn't we, really?
yes,
And
yeah. And I
yeah,
think just give a couple of signposts, I think, as well, just about, well, if I am noticing either the kinds of behaviors that look like that or feel like that, or I'm noticing the impact in me that feels like that, what do I do with it? Because I think that's, again, we only have the narratives that say it's gaslighting, it's abusive, it's harmful, it's, you know, and we have what we think we have to do or should do, shoulds and stuff around that, rather than maybe there's some different ways to approach it, which I guess is some of what we've experimented a bit with and been walking in a bit more lately, in the last few years, really. Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
think
one of the things for me was which just came up a bit really when we were talking a lot about communication, and I've been thinking a lot more about communication, is that we sometimes can get a lot of stories in our head, can't we? And we are convinced of the validity of those, and we don't tend to check in. So some of it is a simple kind of, never feels simple, it always feels difficult. But just pause a minute, sorry about the gravel sounds. Yeah, so some of it, sometimes it is worth checking in with the story and checking whether that harsh tone or whatever it is that you're then telling yourself it means, is it that's what it means?
Yes.
And sometimes it isn't.
No, and even if it is, we can still choose how we respond to that, and it isn't necessary to just stay in it or to learn to be okay with it. It's to get back again to, or learn to be tuning in again to our needs, what's important to us, what we value, and honouring that rather than betraying that, which is what a lot of us are in a pattern of doing, either not believing ourselves or betraying what we need and what's okay for us. Often we've even stopped knowing maybe what that is. So it's really doing that work. That's really helpful work, to be able to do that, to start to know what decision might I want to take in that situation, which may be to leave the situation, like the actual situation, not necessarily the whole thing, but leave the situation. It could be to reframe or change what we're thinking about it. It can be more like we were talking about in our conversation around the energy and how we're thinking about that. So I think it isn't just to sit in it, because I think that just generally is going to activate our defense mode as well, isn't it? To kind of, or perpetuate the stories and the feelings. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking kind of along those lines, and I think thinking about what environment you do need to thrive. More of that, really. It isn't that we've just got to make what's going on over there a different story and therefore just stay as I am. Does that make sense? Oh, you've frozen a little bit. Are you going to come back?
Sorry, you're freezing a little bit on me.
Oh yeah. Okay, you're back now.
Okay, great. So I had the thought just recently about one of those kind of stories that I was telling myself. I remember even in terms of the messages, I used to text quite long messages.
Yes.
And then I would get kind of like okay back or something like that. And I used to tell myself all sorts of stories around that. And he obviously wasn't happy with what I said, or is obviously cross with me, or there was so many things that I invented about that, and I used to feel quite activated in, in terms of my nervous system, and even quite sick when I got that, because I really did interpret it as something. And actually, when I really checked in with him, it just turned up that he actually finds it really difficult to text.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, physically,
the word
he can't
okay.
coordinate it on the keyboard.
No.
Literally, physically finds it hard. Not even, I don't want to go into a massive conversation with you. None of that. It's just I can't do texting.
No, I had something similar. I think ours is long messages are too long. So I'm one for words, so I use more words. And so that makes things complicated and Pete gets lost more quickly. And also, just the thinking about what to reply with, like then having to think about all of that. I remember him saying to me once, he sent me a really short reply to something. And I was like, oh, that's really lovely. And it took him half an hour to think what to put. Something that you and I would be like done in a click, actually was using a lot more thought. And actually then I could have read all sorts into it, when actually what's gone into it is an awful lot of presence and wanting to do the right thing. So and I think something like just, you're right, something as tiny as okay, it's really helpful to notice, what do I do, what do I do with that, and that it is actually our fears and insecurities that are reacting to it.
Absolutely.
Rather than actually being in it.
What am I experiencing in my body, and what story am I then, what narrative am I then using to explain those feelings, when actually checking in could have really given us a very different answer. So that's it's probably a really tiny example, but those things happen so often, don't they? Those kind of little micro moments when you're like, so disconnected with that kind of communication that it all goes. So
I was thinking about another example that I used to experience a lot and still do, but I know what the meaning is more now, would have been something around maybe Pete asking me often what time I'd be home from something. Like I used to go to quite a lot of meetings and things I was involved in, and Pete would always want to know, what time are you going to be home? And typically, I did interpret all of that as feeling very controlling. And why do you don't like me being out? And there was some degree of truth in that, but you don't like something, and you're asking me to, when am I going to be home? It starts to feel confining, rather than actually with enough questions and understanding on the other side of knowing about neurodiversity, I was able to understand that me going out creates a degree of insecurity for Pete, or when somebody will be home means not sure how the evening is going to work, or when it's more that it's an uncertainty now of routines and how the day or the time is working. And it's again, he's asking a clarification and just for information, and I'm loading a lot of stuff on it. So now the same question can come, and sometimes it still does feel, God, I got to give you an answer, but I'm better now at saying, actually, I don't know. I think it's going to be this, and I know that's important to you to know, so I can validate somebody else's experience, and I can validate what I need and what's valuable or important to me at this as well. And it doesn't mean both of our needs are entirely met, but there's a better communication about it, which isn't making lots of assumptions, which is kind of what you were saying, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a really good example of, because that kind of controlling, what feels like quite manipulative behavior, is where you start thinking, oh my goodness, I'm in an abusive relationship. But when you dig underneath, there was no intention of any of that on Pete's behalf, was there?
But it was also activating in me, if I'm honest, with my own fears and insecurities. It was activating in me, oh, you're not happy, and my job, or I feel insecure when you're not happy, so I better sort that out and please that and do that, which sort of trumps everything else. And then underneath that, I feel trapped, because what I want is to feel free and able to do stuff, but there's a deeper insecurity that goes, oh, hello, and comes right out onto the top, and that gets me to please, and then I resent the please, but rather than deal with that in myself, I resent Pete. I project that somewhere else, and that's where we can start getting into really messy territory.
It does get so messy, and you know how hard it was, like initially when we started going away, wasn't it? I mean, I'd be getting, there would be so much upset and distress, and I would just feel so much guilt and just shame around how selfish I was being to go away, you know. And
we have to recognize there's stuff in us, isn't there, too?
yeah, that was a lot of story on my account, and I kind of was feeding into all that, you know, that kind of, they need me, they need me, they need me, I can't go away, they need me, and that made them need me more. And
yeah, exactly.
because they weren't getting used to trying anything different. So I was
No.
making myself available all the time. I was making sure I was meeting everyone's needs and doing all of those kind of really fawning behaviours that meant that my needs weren't being met at all.
No.
Because I was so preoccupied with everybody else's. So in that sense, you could actually say, if we were going to use that word, but we're not, because it wasn't intentional either, that I was really gaslighting myself in the situation.
Yes.
And this is where it all gets really complicated, isn't it? And it's really just a lack of awareness, isn't it? It comes down to a real lack of awareness. All these stories that we tell ourselves and all the things that we tell ourselves that other people are thinking, and it all comes down to the fact that we feel really uncomfortable with this stuff. And we don't like discomfort. I would avoid anything that made me feel uncomfortable.
We also have a tendency to conform as well. I was thinking since our conversation about you know, that thing about when you hear something the same from somebody else that you don't think is true for you, but eventually you think, well, maybe it must be true, or you just kind of conform anyway because it will make things feel less uncomfortable. And it reminded me of a video I saw even recently of some research that they've done it lots and lots of times, but they put somebody in an experiment, just like even about the length of lines on a screen or on a page, and they put them with 3 other people. They think they're all doing the same experiment, but only one of them, the other 3 are actors, so they know what they've been told to say. So they're told to say about which line is longest in a group of lines, and 3 of them have been primed to say the wrong answer, and to notice what the one person who hasn't been primed says. And the first couple of times they disagree with the other person, the other people, and say, no, it's definitely that, not like, they're saying, oh, it's definitely B, and they're like, oh, it's definitely shorter, but then they go for the right one. After about 3, even just the 3rd time, they look at it and they agree with the other people. So that's
incredible.
And it is how we operate, because the fear of being on the outside, the fear of not belonging, the fear of going against the grain, for some of us more than others as well. I think generally all of us have that kind of thing. The research shows that, but some of us more than others, really taps into our fears and our fear of not being liked, of abandonment, of or not belonging, of being wrong. All of our sort of primal fears are all activated in that moment, and so we choose to agree, and that's when we start to betray ourselves, and we start to just go, okay, now I don't really know what I think, because I've decided to agree. And it's really scary.
It's really scary that after only 2 or 3 times, and I that's made me just try and imagine what it'd be like to have a really different sensory experience of the world, or different interpretation of the world, and then have everybody keep telling you that it isn't like that, it isn't like that, don't be silly, it's not too loud, don't be silly, it's not too bright, don't be silly, it's not hot,
don't be silly when you're going out for a meal. Don't be silly, it's just something.
Don't be silly, it's just a wedding, why can't you come? Don't be silly, why are you making a fuss about something? And I can imagine that a whole life of that, you would really lose yourself, wouldn't you? Yeah,
absolutely. And then we're doing something similar as well, because for whatever, I have my own stories about why I do that, you know. And so
I think it's human. I just think it's human, because we are designed to be interrelational beings. We are designed for connection. We need connection. We need to be belonging in a group. So therefore, we want to conform. And even those of us who think of ourselves as rebels tend to find another group to be rebels with. You know, it's like, I'm not going to conform, I'm going to be individual. But, you know, we're rarely individuals, are we? We go and find some other group to be more like, you know, so it's...
which is why I think our challenge in relationships with the degree of difference that a lot of us have, is that one of the best things we can do is really begin the work on ourselves, tuning into ourselves and our needs and who we are, and honoring that in whatever ways we need to, like being with like people. That's really important. And often we've shifted away from that, so moving back towards being with like people and doing more of the things we love, which potentially, or often in the relationships that are struggling, whether whatever kind of relationship it is, the ones that are struggling are the ones where you're just so different. The ones that aren't, there's enough crossover, you know. So we need to do more of that and find the ways then, and there are ways to be better together in difference, and collectively that's what we could all be doing with more in the world right now, rather than saying, you're gaslighting me, you don't see my perspective, you don't see it how I see it, you don't experience it like me. You know, these narratives and these conversations don't bring us back, don't allow us to find routes towards each other. They only divide, and they only create us to go back into our corners, back into our, you know, and dig our heels in and all those kinds of
Put
things.
our walls up, isn't it? That in that situation where we start building our walls to protect ourselves, when actually if we can stay really centered and in what I refer to as the ventral vagal kind of system, where we can be curious, we can really connect, we really just want to understand, and we want to ask those kind of questions and get real clarity around what the other person's experiences, and go, oh, and just be like, and this is my experience, and it's like suddenly there's like, oh wow, I didn't know you did it like that, you know, I didn't know that happened to you, and suddenly you've got a stronger connection than you had when you were just going walls.
I think even with the text, because I often come back to like even how it impacts the tiniest things, like that text thing I was saying, where I learned from Pete that it taken him half an hour to think of the text. You know, this is in the tiniest of scenario, like this is not the biggest of relationship issues, but how we do something is how we're doing everything. So just in that situation, I think we'd already created sort of a bit more capacity in the relationship to be asking or just saying how some things were. And I think the difference was that I said, thank you for replying. You know, it just, there was a, rather than just go, oh, brilliant, at last, he's done what he's supposed to do, let's move on. I did say, oh, thank you, I really appreciated that you sent that, which creates a safe, non-defensive position on the other side, I believe, to say yes. And it took me half an hour to think of what to send to you, and then rather than think, oh, that's really rubbish, it was like, okay, insight, helpful information, this is new, this can help us move forward, you know. And it can be sometimes in these tiniest of moments, literally a moment, where you can get a glimmer of insight or new information or something about someone's experience that you can help you connect better, rather than just stay in your things and say, well, you're supposed to do that. So great.
Yeah. I think we get very so I know in the past I've got like that, you know, when you're kind of thinking, why do I have to give appreciation when nobody gives me appreciation? Why do I have to be appreciative of things that I do all the time? Actually though, it's really not that hard. Get over yourself, give a bit of appreciation, because it goes a really long way, and it does start the next, like you say, it helps reduce defensiveness, it helps people feel better about themselves, it builds other people's self-esteem, and actually, you know, we are doing this for ourselves. You know, it feels like we're trying to do this for other people, but really we're trying to make everything better for ourselves, you know, by making this kind of, you know.
Well, it also communicated a need. I also saw that as, it wasn't as, you know, there's, again, it's rather than is one or the other, well, I'm appreciating Pete, it was also, I'm communicating my need for those kinds of that I do appreciate, and that made I feel good. So I, you know, that was also communicating something that's important to me. So rather than sort of sit over here, not say anything, and the person over there is still like, oh, I put half an hour in, didn't really hear anything, should I bother again? You know, it's like we're expecting so much to happen sometimes without anything happening. Does that make sense? I was thinking yesterday how we often just think it should be easy and it should all just happen, rather than actually it's the work and the effort you put in as a sort of structure or scaffolding that allows there to be an ease inside of it, allows there to be something that feels easier, I think, because the effort and the work's there. So yes, it's work, and then I think there is an ease once you're doing the work.
And I think the ease comes with more practice, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it's just starting small, and believing and noticing, the little shifts that happen because of those
Mm.
changes. And
Mm.
even the smallest of examples, in fact, they're the ones to start with, aren't they? You
They
don't
really-
have to go in big stuff. We always talk about baby steps.
Yeah. Well, the big stuff activates your nervous system so much more. So the small things. So I'm just realizing even more myself that the small things are the things that create the safety and the capacity and proof when it isn't so big. And it's so good to do it there. So good to do it there. Yeah. So the other question I was just wanting to clarify, I think, in this little postscript was when is it gaslighting then? When would it be valid for us to think that is happening? Because I was sort of reflecting on, I think there's been times since we have known about neurodiversity where you could argue, well, we're aware now, so there should be no anything that happens would you have to be that, or I was trying to sort of think when is it appropriate to use that term? Is there a time, or would it still be true that generally a lot of the time for us it's just that people haven't got to the level of awareness yet that they're able to see that there is? Because I think we can sort of know that there's two perspectives, Pete and I, but it doesn't mean that we often forget that there's two perspectives, because we bumble along in life.
I think it's awareness, isn't there? There's awareness and there's as a being, isn't it? It's like actually when it's fully embodied in you and it's just automatic and it. And I think you've got to remember that change is really tricky. So even if you have made somebody aware of a difference that exists and you are accepting it and you're being very positive about it all, doesn't mean that they're going to remember to do something differently each time, and it doesn't remember that you're going to do something differently each time. So I think
the degree to which it's in your different awarenesses is different too, isn't it?
Yeah. And it takes, a lot to change your neural pathways. I mean, it is totally positive, possible. We have this wonderful thing called neuroplasticity, and we can continue to develop all our, but for years, if we've been firing the same things and they've got thicker and more myelinated and they've got more faster, and you're going to go there. So it's very difficult to make the shift. But, and for some, it will be harder than others because habits, are embedded more deeply. And I think a true gaslighting, that absolutely intentional desire to manipulate someone's thinking into really questioning their sanity is really serious. And must be, I think, limited to a small percentage of the population who have some kind of real sort of pathological kind of sociopath kind of like type tendencies. And then we go back to is there intent? But that doesn't mean, intentional or not intentional. So unintentional lack of validation of your experience can still create, we're not trying to devalue whether it's gaslighting or not. We're not trying to devalue the absolute impact it has. We both experienced how when we didn't know.
So I kind of wrote, I was thinking about that and trying to think, well, what's the key things then that have hugely helped me to be able to I guess reverse the impact of a lot of that and to stand steadier in situations that potentially still feel like that. And so the first one was self-trust, which we've talked about a lot. It's actually going back into yourself and beginning to believe again and meet yourself and know who that is, and etc. The second for me was healing. I say, like, healing the emotional wounds, those stories or those wounds that you've had from before that are getting activated when you're in these kinds of situations that feel like gaslighting and control. And I think when we do that, it you'll know there's the sort of biology, the physiology of that is that then our nervous system can be calmer in those situations rather than getting activated. So there's work we can do around that, so we don't have those
creating that pause before we go into that reactivity and just go, no, actually I don't need to do that, it's fine. Yeah.
And then the last thing, which we talk about a lot as well, is courage. The courage to change something, or not conform like you might have done before, or to say your truth, to speak your truth, and that often feels of itself scary and uncomfortable. So it's not to say that we're going to automatically feel very confident and certain in doing that. It's going to feel wobbly and difficult and messy, but it's good to start doing that, and then each time we do it, I certainly just realized that the activation became less and the confidence could become a bit more to say, oh no, I did say how I actually feel, I did say what I actually need, I did say what I actually saw, and
I just make a request.
yeah, and then even if the request is no, not for me, don't like that, diddly, is to say, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Sometimes, I know you don't like it, but I am going to anyway. Or and that can feel really tough, which is why I think the self-trust and the healing or being aware of our own fears are the foundations to being able to do that work. We can often read or think, I've just got to make these changes, but I think without having some awareness and working a little bit on the self-trust and the emotional wounds that actually often predate the relationship, working on those gives us the foundations and some platform off which we feel better able to have the courage to change something. Otherwise I think we feel very wobbly in change.
And we talk about, don't we, and I think we might have said it in the last call about, kind of where we're at, where we meet our own boundaries of comfort is where growth can happen.
Yes.
But we're not trying to just push past those boundaries in some kind of storming tantrum. We're just kind of just nudging up against them and just experimenting with just what it feels like just to hang out there for a little bit. And then the next time we go there, it feels a little bit less scary, a little less anxiety making, and our sensations are a little bit reduced. So then we can sit there a little bit longer and we come back to safety and we calm down, and then we just keep traveling out until this very natural process of expanding those comfort zones and allowing ourselves to be more courageous without actually having to be more brave or more, it's not about, oh my God, you have to be really brave or something. This is just like gradual allowing, natural kind of just getting used to those sensations and just becoming less fearful.
I was listening to something this week, and what you just said really resonated about, because for me, some of the first steps I did about self-trust or making the change were actually nothing outside me at all. They were just thinking my truth inside of me. It was just saying, okay, you said that. I don't have the means at the moment to be able to say outside of me what I actually see or believe. I can't do that. My freeze is on, but I can change how I'm saying that to myself. I can think it, but I can't say it yet. And I want to acknowledge even that is a step.
It's massive. It's massive. And actually that is kind of, finding your voice is a whole different thing. But actually changing your inner critic or your judge or whatever it is you want to call it is a huge step. And this is where, if you can't find your voice, or I find it really helpful, to write it down.
Yes.
I'm not
right. So it's out of you, but not in a different way being out of you. There was this thing I listened to this week was talking about making the unknown known. So getting what's unknown in here that you think others should know or ought to already know or mind read or something, or just in that situation they're not seeing what you see. So your unknown isn't known, and how you make it known, so how your insides become your outsides. And I know from my own experience that is huge and scary and really activates a lot of my stuff. I think it does for a lot of us. So for me, getting more self-assured and certain and confident on the inside was my first step. And then I started to think, okay, I'm going to have to sort out this find your voice thing. That was later.
It was
so
later.
I think it'd be good for people to know that you don't have to do all of that all in one go.
No, Deb Dana has a lovely thing about we need to bring perception to our neuroception. So our neuroception is how we perceive safety or safety or not safety, and it brings up all these sensations in the body. But if you can actually start thinking, oh yes, I'm aware that that has happened, I'm aware that I've been triggered, I'm getting these sensations, and now I can start going back upstream and find the source of that trigger. Well, where's that story? You know, it's like story follows state kind of thing. Where has it come from? Why am I in this state now?
Yes.
Just because someone said something.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's generally from a long time ago. It's generally an old thought, an old feeling, an old situation that's come up in the present, and that we can, there's stuff we can do there, you know. That's what is so powerful. We can do stuff,
and it's those old stories that are undermining our own validity and our own things. This is why we talk about it being our work. And you know, and this is the first steps even before you can kind of hope to see changes within the relationship. It's all at that first step.
It is good. Oh, that felt good to have a bit more of a chat about that. I was going to finish off with just saying, if anybody has any questions from what we've talked about in both of these sort of clips and chats about gaslighting, or any other thoughts on it or their experience, then I'd love for them to be added to the conversation, because it is a really important one, I think. And it can be cut off and just made so, I don't know, so short, because we label it as something that then just means there's no possibility. It's not expanded into anything else. And I think
there's a lot to it when you unpack it.
It makes the possibility so much bigger.
Yeah,
good. Thanks, Heather. Lovely to see you and catch up. We'll catch up again soon.
Super. See you soon. If this episode has resonated with you, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching to get notifications of future episodes. To dive deeper into all of this with professional coaching, resources, and all the support you need, join us in Love Indifference via www.loveindifference.net. And we'll be back here soon.